back with another episode of the 6 Yard Line podcast, transfer episode. This is what, show number 3, Noel?
Yeah, I think it's number 3 already. We're still working our way through, but it's slowed down, like really slowed down. The other one is Fulham. So Fulham, a little bit of a weird one, Fulham, because they had a pretty decent season last year, right? They completely fell off the last 7 to 8 weeks, but I think that them and Forest were probably the two biggest droppers in the last sort of few weeks of the season, where they've been playing really well, got some injuries, didn't have depth, and you paid the price for it. And I look at Fulham, and I don't think they've just re-signed their own player. The only major news I've seen is that they've tried to sign the Shakhtar Donetsk player Kevin, which for a Brazilian called Kevin, it absolutely cracks me up. So I don't know who's a Brazilian called Kevin. I just think it's awesome, greatest name ever. But again, I don't really necessarily see a lot in that deal. Do you know what I mean? Like, I did one thing I did forget to mention about Everton, just on that, which I thought would have been good for Fulham, is Dewsbury Hall from Chelsea, right? So Everton did bring in Dewsbury Hall. I thought that was a player that, I thought Fulham would have gone and got him. Do you know what I mean? Because London on loan, doesn't have to move, would make sense. He fits their style.
Hey, you know what? There's a few teams that there's a lot of things that should make sense that don't make sense when it comes to simplicity of signings. I think Fulham is just, what, they don't have the pockets like some of the other clubs. So, like, what I expect in the next week is you're going to see a flurry of signings, right? And all these teams are going to just be adding up bodies to their roster. And it's not like it'll go into the start of the season, right? Like up until the end of the window, they'll be adding players. But I think in the next week or so, all 3 of these teams are going to be looking to add players, right? They're going to be looking to get some loan deals. They're going to be looking at getting, um, adding a few on permanent. I don't know where Fulham need what, because they don't seem like a team that got rated this summer, right? So,
well, they're about to, right? So I think Fulham's biggest assets right now, number one is Marco Silva, right? He had a pretty good year last year. He's questioning his future with Fulham because, as he put it the other day, Fulham have become stagnant again. And, I think you've got a couple of guys like Alex Iwobi that would make some other teams better. You've got guys like Muniz, who is hot on Atalanta's wanted list in Italy. So I think if Fulham don't make some moves soon, I think it'll cost them their manager. I think it will cost them. And I think Fulham could be one of those teams. There's always one team that suddenly just collapses and struggles in the Premier League. And if Fulham doesn't get anybody in, I think the first casualty will be their manager. And I think somebody will take a flyer on Marco Silva. And if he's not feeling like he's been backed, or if he's not feeling like he's getting the players he wants, I think he'll be the first one to leave, because he's already made those noises before. We've kind of seen this from Marco Silva. But, there is a couple of players on that team that, some teams will look at and go, okay, well, Fulham obviously don't have any money, don't have any ambition. They could plunder in and take a few players, right? Smith Rowe is high on that list. I think somebody will take a flyer on Smith Rowe. But I think the biggest thing, if I was Fulham's concerned, if they don't get players in, if they don't start making some signings, then I do think that Marco Silva will be the first person out the door.
Yeah, and then come January, you could see that's when the floodgates could open when it comes to changes with that team. So they'll, again, I think the problem is because of the lack of signings we've seen from these 3 teams, it's hard to really break down what their needs are, or what strength they've added to their current roster, what to expect from them. These three, because they each need what 3 or 4 players at minimum, right? And we're not even talking, and that's probably just looking to start. Then you have to look at depth players, right? Are you going to go with like what direction you can go there? Um, I think I'm as someone who doesn't follow those three. Of the three, seeing Everton in the situation, I don't feel bad for them, but I think they of all those three need players because again, you can't afford to go into the brand new stadium and be in a relegation battle because the last thing you want to see is happen is that you do get relegated.
Yeah, I think Everton will probably do out of the three teams we've mentioned. I think Everton will probably be the best of those three. Because I just Fulham, I just don't understand. Like you had a Wobie the other day I saw was talking about wanting to be in Europe and getting Fulham to be in Europe, but if they don't strengthen and don't give him like every team around them is kicking on. Like, we talked about Brentford recently, and Brentford's lost a lot of players, but Brentford's also trying to actively replace those players. Fulham just seem to be just going through the motions, and yeah, we might get a flurry of signings, and it might completely shift how we view them. But if I look at all these three teams, I think Everton, I think they'll get something, but I don't necessarily see the same with West Ham and Fulham at this point that's moving them forward. And the bar's pretty low at Everton because they've been in a relegation fight for so many years now. It's not nothing new. I think the other two, it might be something new because they haven't been in there for a while, right? I think West Ham was 17th for a while last year, and then, fortunately, Tottenham turned up and took that spot for them, and Man United kind of dropped down. So I just think if you look at them, I think Fulham's just, I don't know what they're doing. They are the epitome of what I don't like sometimes about the Premier League. And that's like teams that are just happy to just stay in the Premier League and not do anything. And I generally feel that's one of those things that frustrates me a little bit with a team like Fulham. When you had a good season last year, you're not reloading, you're not adding players, you're not really doing anything, you're just standing still. And if you stand still in the Premier League, you get found out really quickly.
Yeah, you would expect them to build off of last season. Of the teams like yourself that maybe fell off near the end, they were still in a good enough race for them to be like, what, if we can add, we don't necessarily need big name players, but if we can add a couple of key additions, we can have a better run going into next season. But clearly that isn't their ambition, or their board doesn't see it the same way. So
But,
all right, that's it for me. Noel, have a good one.
all right, man. Thanks. Talk
All
soon.
right, talk to you later. Peace out, everyone.